This episode of the All About Nothing podcast is brought to you by GOT Sound Studio. GOT Sound Studio offers a variety of experiences: music, voice, and instrumental recording and production, video, and still photography. GOT Sound Studio has all of your media needs met. Owned and operated by Dominique Stewart, the Neek the Geek, experienced artists as well as up-and-coming will find everything they need to create. Bring your media needs to one of the most talented producers and engineers in the business, Neek the Geek. You can find details by visiting gotsoundstudio.com or calling 803-243-2302. You can also find links in the Friends of the Pod section of our website. Visit theallaboutnothing.com.
Recorded live from the Maddie Johnson podcast studio at GOT Sound Studio in Columbia, South Carolina. This is the All About Nothing podcast. The views expressed on this program are the opinions of the host. Some content and subject matter may not be appropriate. Listener discretion is advised. Listeners are encouraged to follow the show at theallaboutnothing.com for links to social media and more. Listeners can call the show at 803-672-0533. Thank you for listening.
All right, welcome to another episode of the All About Nothing podcast. This is episode 133. I'm joined by Zac King, of course, as well as we have the host of the History Voyager Podcast, Ben Kitchings. Thank you for being here, Ben.
How you doing, everybody? How you doing?
We're doing well for a Sunday morning recording. Real quick before we get into it, I just want to thank everybody for listening. You could go anywhere for all of this nonsense and jabber, and sometimes long, rambling diatribes, but you could go anywhere for that, but you're here, so thank you very much. Also, please subscribe to the show. Subscriptions drive all of our searches, and that's how we get new listeners. So also, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast and you think we're worth it, go ahead and give us one of those 5-star reviews. And if you're feeling like you want to be in the giving mood, I mean, we're moving into that season, go ahead and head over to our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com, and at the top, you can find a link to our Patreon page where you can make a per episode donation, or you can make single donations, whatever. But it helps us in that we have to pay for studio time normally. So with that all out of the way, I also we did get some listener feedback from our episode with Sarah Work, who is the Alliance Party nominee for the South Carolina Secretary of Treasury, or the Treasury Office. I want to say hello to Margaret Ann Clapp, who is the mother of that particular candidate. We had Sarah Work on, South Carolina State Treasurer. That's what I meant to say. So special thanks to Margaret Ann for writing in and supporting the show. Hopefully you're continuing to listen and hear this. I'll probably email you and say, hey, it was within the first 2 minutes. So with that out of the way, also, actually one last thing. This episode releasing on Monday. Today is the start of Diwali. So happy Diwali to all of our Indian listeners. And we do have a fair amount of Indian listeners, either here in the States or offshore in India. I have a number of coworkers that listen. So happy Diwali to everybody. Of course, if you don't know, Diwali is the festival of celebrating the victory over light, of light over darkness, good and evil, and knowledge over ignorance. So I think that we attempt to stride to fight that ignorance here on this podcast. So that is
what?
Diwali.
Diwali, I like it. I'm doing Diwali this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So happy Diwali to all of our listeners. It is one of the biggest holidays in the Hindu religion, as well as Sikhs and others. But yeah, happy Diwali. Hopefully we'll be celebrating our own Diwali come November 9th. To get into it, the reason that we have Ben on the show this week is because Ben is not only has a degree in political science, but he is also a survivor of living in the state of Georgia. So we're gonna discuss today some of the ongoings with the election coming up in Georgia, because if you pay any attention to national news, or even if you live in the state of Georgia, I cannot imagine what it must be like as far as like commercials and advertising that you see, because big state Senate election going on between Raphael Warnock, the Democrat incumbent, and Georgia's number 34, and I don't mean that in IQ, Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker has made waves recently with the his Senate campaign, I guess, and then the news that comes out almost, I want to say, at least weekly of the things that he's either said or done. Ben, just to get us started, like what is it like in a campaign like this? Because I know, and I'll just preface this by saying, Warnock ran in a special election against. I was it the
he did not. Okay, wait. Let me stop you. I don't mean to interrupt you. He did. It wasn't a special election. It wasn't. And it was an election, like a regular election. It was just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was to complete the term of, I forget who
somebody died or retired. Because Loeffler had that. Loeffler was the one that was appointed, right?
Well, Loeffler was the one who took. Okay, there's two of them, Ossoff and Warnock.
Right.
Okay, and without Wikipediaing it right now, they ran at the same time, for two different seats, both Ossoff and Warnock. Ossoff is actually from, I think, Decatur.
That sounds right.
His girlfriend / wife, I don't know what. There's a woman that he claims to be in a relationship with, and she claims to be in a relationship with him. So whatever that is today, right? Whatever they call that
partnership.
She's a doctor. Okay, she's a doctor at Emory or something, like a surgeon or something like that. So these are two smart, capable people, I suppose. Anyway, so that was crazy. That rate was insane. This is mild by comparison.
Oh, interesting.
Because think about, put your memory cap back on. 2020 was insane. Okay,
yeah.
You had a plague, and I had a podcast where I talked about COVID. So I was talking to regular people and all kinds of folks. There was a shocking number of humans in 2020 that simply did not think COVID was real. They thought the whole thing was like, I mean, what was it? Like the Hollywood elite and the Democratic Party got together with somebody else and blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, Sure.
I don't get that. It's insane.
Well, I get it because I talk to these people. So I get it. And I'm going to get into that maybe a little bit. But so this is, I'm sorry, this is tame by comparison.
That's interesting.
When you started to see like ads, I talked about this on a podcast nearly 2 years ago. There was an ad that ran on my YouTube literally all the damn time. I'll never forget it. It ran, you know how YouTube ads are, like every 30 seconds or whatever the hell?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I say hell on this podcast? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, fuck it. We're good.
But you know how like every 30 seconds you'll see like a YouTube ad? So this one, I swear to God, ran every 30 seconds. And it was like, vote for senatorial candidate X, because if you don't, Joe Biden will listen to the scientist. Now mine.
Oh no. Scientist, a bunch of assholes always trying to prove stuff.
Now let's walk through this. Let me walk through this insanity with you, okay? Before we get to the present day. All right, I'm watching this on high-speed internet. There's a limited number of physical locations you can have internet fast enough to watch what you call television on.
Okay.
Okay. I happen to live in one of those places.
Right.
All right. Okay. How many people do you honestly think, not you, but humans of Earth, how many people do you honestly think are both smart enough to be able to pay for high-speed internet, and also B, dumb enough to think COVID is fake? How big of a population is that?
So
this ad for Republican senatorial candidate X was actually working in the opposite direction. I swear to God. It was working in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Finding these people who are just so full of credulity will believe anything, but then won't believe COVID's real. It just like I don't get it. It's like I picked the path the most stupid. Let's go.
Yeah. I am dumbfounded. I'll just say I am dumbfounded by the number of people that will sit in a congregation, and don't get me wrong, I have nothing against the individuals that believe that they need to sit in a church on a weekly basis and beg for forgiveness. I was I'm not a practicing. I can still consider myself a Catholic, but that they will sit in a church and literally believe whatever it is that they're told from the pulpit, and then will go home, eat dinner in front of the television, listening to the news, and be like, "No, that's horseshit. That I cannot believe that."
Yeah, I can't decipher these things.
Here's something. So my podcast started out as a deep dive into the Spanish flu, and here's something that I believe wholeheartedly that I wasn't even aware of before I got about halfway through the research on my podcast, my Spanish flu show, which not to toot my own horn, but please go listen to that. I put a lot of effort into those shows. And I mean, if I wasn't me, I'd listen to them, but I'm me. So I don't really want to hear that anymore.
It's the History Voyager podcast, available on all of the podcast platforms.
But people, like, it was at one point, it was like really high up in the history podcast situation. And I'm going to do other deep dives. If these people stop being fascinating, I'm going to do other deep dives. The problem is regular humans are so interesting. They're just
that's a fact.
Freaking fascinating. So, okay, here's what I was telling you. When I got about halfway through my show on the research for my show on the Spanish flu, I figured out a couple of things. People in 1918, regular, normal humans in 1918, on the average, were smarter than they are today.
That's interesting.
I swear to God, that's true. Maybe they didn't have.
When we define intelligence, smarter, do we just mean like they were more intelligent about decisions they made, things like that, or just all encompassing?
Okay. Let me give you an example of what I mean, because I didn't go to school for psychology. So let me give you an example for what I mean.
Or anthropology.
If you don't know something, it's 2022. If you don't know something, what do?
I look it up. I research.
Where?
Fire up the Google machine.
Exactly.
Yeah. Generally, it's something pulled from the internet. Yeah.
Okay. Now, your brain is not actually a muscle, but let's say that it is. Let's say it's a muscle, okay? What happens if you quit using that muscle?
It gets weak.
It becomes flaccid.
Right. Now, in 1918, they didn't have Google. That's obvious to those. That's obvious to the Gen X people on this podcast. Maybe not so to the Gen Z people listening. But
you just had to go to the encyclopedia that you bought from the guy in the station wagon.
But I'm just saying, like, you had to figure things out and you had to retain it. And also, like, with Google, there's like an information auction. So I run Google Ads. There's an information auction going on with your Google Ads.
Oh, yeah.
With your Google searches that's predicated on a lot of things, including what have you searched for before?
Right.
And
absolutely right.
Even our friends at Google over there, the Don't Be Evil Inc., very recently came out and said they don't know how good cleaning out your Google account actually is for giving you new information.
Oh, okay.
So if you're one of these people that you think that you're just a Republican because, it's a tribal situation and the head of your tribe says COVID isn't real, and then you Google it and, whatever. I mean,
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Now you just build your, like they say, your own little bubble based on past searches and stuff like that, and you don't get any new information. So
And
Yeah, absolutely.
here's the part that I really think is scary. If you're a kid, if you're just a child, and you're just doing your homework, you're just over here doing your homework. Your homework answers are going to come back to what mommy and daddy search for, because Google accounts know where Google accounts are. Like they know they see other Google accounts that they hang out with.
Yeah, IP addresses.
So, right. So that to me is actually really scary. And I want these elderly members of Congress to figure that out. Let's,
and they're not, because they're elderly.
But that's the thing. Like that's my biggest apolitical, technological request of our government is we need to figure out a way for Google accounts to be able to separate themselves from other Google accounts so that you can, I don't know, like
inside the same basic
house
out your neighborhood, your demographic,
yeah, exactly.
I can see that. I can see that being an issue, because I don't. So here in South Carolina, we have a governor's race between Henry McMaster's, who has been in politics longer than any of us has potentially been alive, and possibly you combine our ages. He's been in politics for that long. He has ideas on how to appropriate funding for schooling, and he's not stepped into a public school in a professional way in so many years. I don't think he has grandchildren that are still in school. So in my mind, I feel like he's too far separated from reality in that. Same with his stance on abortion. His stance comes from an extremely religious view over this idea that a woman is carrying a baby in her womb, which is, medically speaking, completely inaccurate. Even from a religious standpoint,
up until a certain trimester,
but even from a religious standpoint, until that baby breathes air, until that that individual breathes air, it's not considered being alive until it breathes on its own, just from a religious aspect. But they Christianity denies itself.
I think there's a lot of people. Barrett, you and I grew up in DeKalb County, Georgia. I think I can say that out loud where there's people.
Zach knows.
Well, I mean, I
know. I
met Barrett's mother the other day too. She admitted it as well.
Yeah,
I don't know how many.
She even admitted that I was hers.
Yeah,
she did.
Okay. Well, anyway, so DeKalb County at that time, and even more now, is a very diverse area.
It is,
and there's a lot of people. Not a lot of. Well, there's, objectively speaking, a lot of people in this country that don't live as an area as diverse as what we grew up in and where I live today. There's just a lot of people that don't see. They don't see people who don't look like them, so they don't understand. There's some pretty cartoonish ideas you can get. Right-thinking people can get about other people.
Sure.
Sure. Like if they don't encounter these people in the world, and this is a problem.
From the perspective of an individual who grew up in an environment like we did, Ben and I, and acknowledging the fact that in high school we had the M2M program, which was majority to minority or minority to majority. It was basically the idea busing minorities out of their neighborhoods into like the North Lake area, which was
where we grew up, basically.
Yeah, it was fairly affluent, middle to upper middle class white, and our high school would have been mostly white if not for that M2M program.
Well, let me give Zach an updated mental image of what we're talking about. So the North Lake area is named after a mall that is now no longer with us. It's deceased.
Yeah.
And when that mall was on life support before the plague, there would be several Teslas parked in the dead mall parking lot, in the dying mall parking lot. Now, what was trippy about that, what was really trippy about that to me was I actually saw the mall when like the only stores there was like this rando Mexican place. There's
like a
rando Mexican place, a couple t-shirt shops, and like a place. You remember the Blockbuster Music? They were literally selling they were literally selling candles out of the Blockbuster Music.
Ben, I remember when that was a Turtle Music.
Well, me too.
I remember. Yeah, I remember going there to buy tickets to concerts because that was Ticketmaster was inside the Turtles.
Yeah. Okay. So the point is they were selling candles out of that before the mall died. Like they were.
Wow.
Okay. So the fact that you're seeing a Tesla parked in front of a mall, and you're just like, what? Okay, maybe you're going to the Mexican stand. I mean, those are some good tacos, buddy. I'm not lying. Those.
Yeah.
I'd go. I'm here for that now. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the area. That's the updated, circa 2018 version of what we're talking about with this mall. Okay, with this area. Okay, so yeah. But
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I think that the idea of those centralized, multi-tiered, multi-stored malls have I think that was a product of like the mid 80s to the early 2000s. I know
exactly what that was.
Oh yeah.
It was in the tax code. And it was in the tax code from the 50s or the 60s, all the way to the 2000s. And here's the deal. Only in the last several iterations of that bill did they actually name it as a mall.
Okay.
But they described it. They would actually describe it as like a 2-story structure with blah, 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 blah. And the reason why was they wanted people to move out into what we call greenfield development.
Yes.
They wanted to create suburbs. And there might have been some racial aspects to it. There probably were some racial aspects to that. But really what it was this nightmare scenario of the nuclear bomb coming and you're going to blow up Boston. And so all those Boston people are going to be dead. So we need to move them out. We need to get them out into the countryside. So how do we do that? We make malls and we do this and we do that. And blah, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's, while I hate visiting malls now, I don't like to see empty malls. Like we have a mall that I used to frequent for movies on the weekends because it was $5 to go to a movie. But like, I don't like visiting it because it looks so down. It just looks so decrepit. I mean, they took a 2-story, I don't know if it was a Macy's or something like that, but they took a 2-story Macy's and turned it into a Planet Fitness. So, to me, I mean, it's depressing to see the state of some of these structures. We have a mall here that the Richland Fashion Mall that over the course of my time being here, and I've lived in Columbia now for 21 years and actually 22 years. I've seen, Richland Fashion Mall had everything when I first moved here. And over the course of these 20 years, it has degraded from everything to maybe having 1 or 2 stores. It was the only place that you could find a TGI Fridays, which this is not an endorsement for TGI Fridays, Do not spend your money at TGI Fridays. You're making a mistake.
Yeah, I knew you were about to start shitting on TGI Fridays.
What was? Hang on. What was that dessert? I hadn't been to a TGI Fridays in forever, but there was a dessert they had. There was that dessert they had that was the shit, and I can't think of what it was like. It was like their specific take on a brownie with ice cream was actually really good. And,
yes.
I will not have your slander on this.
If what's Friday's name out your goddamn mouth.
In your best Will Smith impression. Yeah. I don't know. The idea of having a restaurant that basically was nothing but appetizers and priced it the same as an entree to me it didn't make a whole lot of sense. You know,
you can buy in the freezer section and taste exactly like what you were ordering.
No, not only that, but they literally marketed TGI Friday frozen meals in the freezer section. It's like, I don't have to go and pay a waiter to spit in my food. Here we go.
Jalapeno poppers.
But don't you
these myself?
But don't you remember how the 2008 crash did that?
Yeah.
The 2008 crash is what brought things like that to the freezer section.
Yeah.
Now we're all old enough to know that.
Yeah.
I graduated high school in 2007, so I was not paying too much attention to the housing problem.
You were just a little separated from the owning of a home and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, I can say
I now with a child and everything, but
I graduated from Ben and I graduated in 97, and by 2002 I owned this home. Like I built and moved into this home in 2002. I'm not sure how many of the kids we went to school with had that, because I'm guessing that most of the kids I went to school with probably went, through college and whatnot. But so I didn't experience the 2008 housing market crash from the perspective of it hurt me. I mean, financially, sure, my 401k took a dip, and I saw some of the homes in our neighborhood start to lose out. But that, and that kind of ties us back into the election that we're currently, 16 days out from.
Now let's get back to reality. Let's get back to more of the present day. But okay, so all right, so 2020 was nuts. So this is tame by comparison. Okay.
That's interesting. Yeah, because like I said, from the perspective of somebody outside of Georgia, listen to the national news, watching these interviews, watching the debates on YouTube.
No,
it is incredible. What's
crazy is Herschel Walker being the candidate. That's nuts.
Yeah, that is crazy.
That part is nuts. And what's even nuttier than that is there's a lot of people that, some of them I know, that are over here saying that they want Herschel Walker to be their senator. And I'm like, exactly why?
Right.
Let's pretend that we don't live in the world we live in. Please tell me how he's the better candidate. I'll sit and wait.
Yeah. Okay. So I will play devil's advocate. So Herschel Walker. Okay. So if I were of the voting population that was considering Herschel Walker to be the candidate that they wanted to elect, I look at Herschel Walker as being a gelatinous, semi-structured form that could potentially be molded into what you would want as far as a representative. I'm not saying that he represents the people of Georgia, because he's not even he was from Georgia. He went to the University of Georgia. He played for Dallas. He doesn't even currently live in Georgia. He has property under his ex-wife's name that he claims so that he can be a candidate in Georgia, but he doesn't live in Georgia. He lives in Texas. All right, that's where he lives, and it's kind of the same as Dr. Oz. He lives in New Jersey, but he's running in Pennsylvania. Because these are considered. It's not even that Warnock is an easy target. He is a fantastic candidate for representing the state of Georgia. From my perspective, not living in Georgia, where Herschel Walker, and because Warnock comes with a whole host of already formed opinions. He's
Right.
he's the pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King served as the head pastor during his time. He's written books. He's clearly intelligent when it comes to what the state of Georgia needs out of the federal government. He knows what's going on there. But what you get in Herschel Walker is this unmolded clay that you believe that he's going to go in there, and because he was able to run up and down a field and take blows to the head, that you think that there's still space in there for him to take the ideas of his constituents and put that into the federal government. Which, here's the thing, and I don't want this to come off sounding as though I don't think of Herschel Walker as being capable, because I don't also want it to sound like I think that he is. He is the poster child for why they needed to upgrade helmets both in college football and NFL in their time period.
Exactly.
This man has taken so many blows to the head that he's admitted that he suffers from mental issues, likely because of the number of times that he had 300-pound men run into him.
I mean, you have to have that done to you to pull out a fake badge during that debate and just...
Well, so I wanted to talk about that too.
Please do.
So when I worked in radio, there was a sheriff, and I wrote it down. I worked in radio. I worked at I worked at Kicks 101.5 in Atlanta, and I worked under Moby Carney. I can't remember. Moby in the Morning. And
I thought it was Moby.
Moby in the Morning was a country DJ in town for ages.
And you know, it's funny. During my time period with him, and after that, he's always been this very conservative, very Republican DJ. Like, everything was law enforcement support, army, military support. Everything was that way. And he always played it like that. In fact, he was one of the first people that broke the story that he had gotten from a friend that worked at the National Enquirer about Clinton and the blowjob in the White House, or in the Oval Office. But what I'll say about the badge is, I don't think the badge was fake. I think that the badge was an honorary sheriff's deputy badge that he was given, and he potentially has many of them. He said that he has. But I recognize that sheriffs will dole out these basically worthless pieces of tin that are basically just trophy pieces. And I believe that that's what Herschel Walker got. But somewhere in his head, he got this idea. Yeah, he thinks that because someone gave him, because when I was on the morning show, that was one of the things that happened, was the sheriff of Cobb County, and I'm looking it up to see what his name was, because I know I wrote it down.
It's much more sad with the way you're going with this.
Yeah, Bill Hudson. Bill Hudson was the sheriff of Cobb County when I worked at the radio station. And one of the things that happened was we had him on, and then he gave several of us honorary deputy badges. That basically the idea behind them was, if you get pulled over, just have your license in there, flip it open, and you're likely to get yourself talked out of a speeding ticket. Now, I never did anything like that, and in fact, the one that I was given, I'm pretty sure I left in my locker at the radio station and never took it out, because he was up for re-election, and I may be wrong, I may be right, but I don't think he got reelected, which meant at that point, that sheriff's badge, whatever potential magic powers it had, were gone, because he was no longer sheriff. You're only a deputy under the sheriff. If you stay on with a deputy for a sheriff's department, it's because that next sheriff basically re-deputized you. But the fact that they had to spend some amount of time before that debate saying, Herschel, we see you with a duffel bag. You can't take that on stage. There's no props allowed. And he pulls this badge out, and then she says, we warned you, you can't pull out props. And he did it anyway, and then had the nerve to say, oh, it's not a prop, it's real. No one's classifying as not real. They're simply saying it's a prop. You can't pull out prop, because and
it's a prop in the way that you're not allowed to have it there, like to assist you in your debate. Yeah.
The crowd in that debate laughed, despite the fact that I heard them cheer for him. They applauded him for a lot of the things he said. But even that crowd that was very Herschel Walker heavy supporters, they laughed at him. And I have to believe that just even semi-intelligent voters in the state of Georgia recognize Herschel Walker's his deficiencies over his potential benefits. So, I don't see all
Georgia. He's a bulldog.
Yeah, but which means he didn't go to Georgia Tech or Georgia State, and he doesn't have a degree in political science, and he doesn't have a degree in engineering. Yeah. So, and that's not to shit on anybody that went to University of Georgia. I have the utmost respect for, the individuals that I know that went to the University of Georgia, because I know that they worked hard. They had their degrees in teaching. They have their degrees in horticulture and farming, and they earned really important degrees that we need in this country to be able to support ourselves.
UGA these days is actually a really good school. I can't speak to how it was when Herschel was there, but nowadays it's actually a really good school.
Yeah.
And
a school perspective, education perspective, it is a good school.
Yeah, these days.
It's like University of South Carolina here. Law, what are the big things that come out of the University of South Carolina? Business and law. I mean, those are huge here.
I'm gonna tell you a story.
Medical.
When I went to college, I met a guy from Wrightsville, Georgia, which is where Herschel Walker is actually from.
Right.
So, without saying specific stories, I'll just say that the Walker family was fairly well known within the community for obvious reasons. Okay, Herschel Walker is a legend at UGA, and also, I don't know when he quit playing for the Giants and the Cowboys or the Jets and the Cowboys, whoever it was, but he might have still been playing.
His career ended in 97. That was when he was done with football.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm learning. I learn stuff on my podcast all the time.
He did not last very long.
No, he played with the Cowboys from 86 to 89. Then he went to the Vikings from 89 to 91. Was traded to Eagles 92 to 94. He played with the Giants for a year in 95, and then went back to the Cowboys for a couple seasons, 96 and 97.
Wasn't he in the original?
He was in the U.S.
Trump, right? Yeah, the USFL.
He was in the USFL for a while. That's real. Yeah. He was in the USFL.
All right, Nothingers, I want to cue you in about a friend of the pod, Blank Canvas Brand. If you own a business or restaurant and the time has come to build that unique brand, you have got to get a hold of Blank Canvas Brand. Blank Canvas Brand specializes in brand identity, including logos, business cards, flyers, and anything else to promote your business. And now, Blank Canvas Brand offers printing services to help with your clothing needs, including sports teams. I can tell you from our own experience, Blank Canvas Brand is responsible for our logo, as well as the Bowl of Duty bowling team logo, and we couldn't be happier with what's been produced. For more information, you can search Facebook for Blank Canvas, or you can email Blank Canvas at theallaboutnothing.com. That's BLNKCANVS at theallaboutnothing.com. You can find links in the Friends of the Pod section of our website. Visit theallaboutnothing.com. Hey everyone, I want to take a quick moment to mention one of our new sponsors, thepaintedmoment.com. That's thepaintedmoment.com. Check this out. Have you ever taken a photo with your phone or digital camera that would look amazing as a watercolor canvas painting? Well, now there's a website ready to take your photo and turn it into digital painted moments. This is how it works. Visit thepaintedmoment.com, follow the instructions, and your digital photo will be enhanced and returned to you with links on where you can have an image printed to canvas or whatever else you'd like to do with it. We've already got a couple of these enhanced photos hanging around the house, and trust me, you'll love what comes out. Thepaintedmoment.com. Create a painted moment in time from your digital photos. Thepaintedmoment.com. Seriously, check them out today. Thepaintedmoment.com. What is a vaccine? What is a virus? What is a mask? What's a Sasquatch? These are all valid questions, and to answer them in one breath, prevention, potentially deadly, potentially life-saving, and don't be stupid. Look, The coronavirus from 2019 has caused a global pandemic that continues to ravage our planet, leaving victims and survivors. But you can do your part. In the United States, as well as most countries around the world, the COVID-19 vaccine is available at little to no cost. Regardless of your politics, this virus has the potential to cause irreparable harm to you and vulnerable family members and friends. We have an opportunity through the efforts of medical science to balance the scales against this disease and its variants. And look, I don't understand how the vaccine works, even though I've heard it described countless times by countless experts. And even though none of that makes any sense to me, I do recognize that the money and effort spent on the vaccine has not been wasted. And it's not a global positioning transmitter being embedded in your arm. You're holding that in your hand, listening to this. So get the vaccine. Protect yourself. Protect your loved ones. Hell, protect the guy standing behind you waiting on his taco supreme and nacho fries. Let that be the reason his organs shut down. For more information, visit covid19.nih.gov for actual science information. We have to thank our sponsor, GOT Sound Studio, and its owner and operator, Dominique Stewart, better known as Neek the Geek. GOT Sound Studios offers a variety of recording experiences from music, voice, and instrumental recordings and production, as well as podcasts. GOT Sound Studio is located in Columbia, South Carolina, and operated by the most talented producer and engineer in the business. GOT Sound Studio is a Black-owned business. Bring your recording business needs here. You can find details on their Facebook page or by calling 803-243-2302 or emailing gotsounds@theallaboutnothing.com. That's gotsounds@theallaboutnothing.com. You can find links in the Friends of the Pod section of our website. Visit theallaboutnothing.com.
This is Judd Larkins, and I am the Democratic nominee for the 2nd Congressional District, and you are listening to the All About Nothing podcast.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to tell you. So, there are stories that I heard from my friend and my friend's sister and some other people that I think my friend's sister knew. I don't remember how they were connected to these two people, but they were connected somehow. But I've heard stories about Herschel Walker for years.
Yeah,
because I still keep in touch with him. He's one of my best friends in the whole world, and blah blah blah. I still keep up with him. I regularly hear about supposed bombshell revelations about Mr. Walker, and I'm like, wait, I know I knew that. I absolutely know I knew that.
Yeah, because it's kind of like that's kind of like me with watching the January 6th hearing, the committee hearings, where they will say something, they'll put it on screen, and it's like, I knew that. Like these are all things that while I didn't have the evidence to support it, but it was like I knew, in my head, there's no way I didn't know that Donald Trump was the head of this whole thing, or
no,
anyway,
but
sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I'm not saying like. I'm saying like I heard that story.
Oh, I
like
see. Yeah.
I heard that story about that, person X or whatever. I know, like, so when you're saying like how secret are these kids? Like, secret from who? Are they secret from the people? Who are they secret from? Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Not to drag any specific incident into any specific thing, but my thing is like, did anybody tap Trump on the shoulder and be like, hey man, buddy, pal, mayhaps we shouldn't have Herschel Walker because
that's a great question, because honestly, I think there probably were people around Trump who probably were of the mindset that, hey, we need to dissuade Trump from really backing this guy. We can back. There are so many. Hell, you could. Is Zell Miller dead?
Yes.
Zell Miller was a Democrat. He's dead. Okay, never mind.
Zell
You can't run
dead.
Zell Miller. I mean, okay, for the Republican Party, Zell Miller was a Democrat, but he ran when he was governor of Georgia, he was the one that actually brought about the lottery system into Georgia, legalized the lottery in Georgia so that we could have things like the Hope Scholarship and things like that.
He was a very conservative Democratic governor of Georgia.
Yes.
And
yeah.
His mother was a teacher. He went to the Marines, and I actually had a professor who knew him, who actually knew Zell Miller, had worked for him.
Yeah.
And worked with him and for him. And, I heard stories about what he used to call the M&M boys, Murphy and Miller.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. I thought Zell Miller was a good governor for Georgia. When he got tapped to replace one of the senators again, he got placed, or he was put in place by a Republican governor, or no, by a Democratic governor, to fill that Senate seat. But as soon as he became a senator, he went right.
So let me tell you a little bit about why I think, what I think the real political moment is here. So Atlanta is one of the fastest growing places, and you just heard how I said that, right? You just heard how I said Atlanta. That's how you know somebody's from Atlanta, because they don't say the T's in the words. Like people from Atlanta don't say T's inside words. It's like, so anyway,
Atlanta?
I'm from
Atlanta.
What? I think that's in Texas. I think Atlanta is in Texas, or there's other Atlantas, but
yeah.
But here we say Atlanta.
Yeah, that's fair. Hell, I had to go to broadcast school to learn to lose most of my Southern accent. So I agree.
Okay, so T's in the words, not a thing. But what I was going to say was Atlanta has become, in my lifetime, one of the big cities in America.
Yeah,
one of the big metros in America. There's a constant partisan fight as to how many people live here. I think the official estimate is about 6 or 7 million people.
Yeah.
It's approximately 60% of the state in population.
Yeah.
Is Metro Atlanta. Most of that, and here's the other thing, and this is new from 2020. I have a buddy who works with demographics for his job. And he said, Ben, I swear to God, it's like the last thing these people did before they moved here was fill out the census for where else they lived. I swear to God, Ben, you would not believe. So he has access to all these databases about like food and like groceries and things and blah, blah, blah. He's like, man, you would not believe, you got some specific Krogers or some specific whatevers up there in the northern metro, man, the far north metro, and they're doing gangbusters. I mean, they can't even they're selling food like they never. And I went to Cartersville, Georgia a couple of weeks ago. That place in the last 3 years has had some mind-bending growth. I mean, just absolute, it's gone from like a biggish little town to like a big place in 3 years. And you can see like the traffic on these 1.5 lane roads is just stupid. It's like,
I believe it.
You can be rolling down the road and be like, okay, that house hit the lottery. That house hit the lottery.
I can see that.
There's some little country houses on these little 1.5 lane roads. And you're like, as you're stopping in bumper to bumper traffic, and you're like, all right, they're going to be rich.
Even where my mother and brother live out in Auburn, they're basically recognizing that Auburn and Decula and over towards Winder, that basically, if it weren't for the fact that Winder is named Winder, there's a possibility that you could see Winder area becoming the next Roswell. I mean, it's the growth is unbelievable in the around Atlanta.
For sure. And here's what I'm trying to say. So I went to college at first in the mountains. And as a 19-year-old or 20-year-old, I remember looking up in these mountains and being like, this is going to be a place where some rich people live. And no, Ben, shut up. What are you talking about? I'm like, look, when you build up here, you got to do something. Like there's a mountain and you got to do something to it. Either flatten it out or move it somewhere else or whatever. Okay, I'm just saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no coal in Georgia.
Right.
There's not much coal in Georgia that you
what I'm
could
saying
level
is,
a mountain for. But yeah,
you're not going to put a 7-Eleven. You're not going to put a 7-Eleven in 2022 on top of a mountain. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe a hospital. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
they'll put hospitals almost anywhere.
Maybe an Apple store, but you know.
Okay. So side topic or side question. Within 10 miles of where you live, and I'll go to Zach in just a second, but within 10 miles of where you live, how many Apple stores are within say 10, like a diameter of 10 miles from where you live?
10 miles. Hang on.
Well, so while you're figuring that out, Zach, how many Apple stores exist within 10 miles of where you live? Not a one.
Nope.
Columbia, South Carolina has one of the highest populations of individuals that go either to the University of Georgia, to Columbia, International. We have so many schools here, and a very young population that we still do not have a single Apple store. And I'm not saying that I would frequent it, but it would be nice to know that it was available. So Apple, do your due diligence. Make Columbia, South Carolina, one of the greatest Apple locations that because I'm tired of looking at some of these people at Best Buy that are in the Geek Squad and going, no, they can't fix my phone. That's not an Apple genius. They got to have that genius title.
Yeah. I don't know about that either.
10 mile. Okay, wait. 10 mile. I can give you an answer.
Okay.
10 miles. No. I am probably 20 something miles from maybe 3 Apple stores.
Okay. That's still crazy. That's still crazy.
Well, okay. I'm not an Apple user. I'm an Android. Sure. I'm a proud Android user.
Sure.
Love the platform. Hate Samsung. But here we are. I don't know if the Chinese get on the nice list. There might be a OnePlus phone in my future.
There you go.
Future. I'm just saying.
But yeah, there is the demographic here in Columbia, South Carolina would absolutely support an Apple store, and we still don't have one. We're when this census came out, basically, Columbia, South Carolina is not a huge population. Yeah. I mean, we're just on the cusp, or had just passed between the 3 major counties. In Columbia that make up Columbia, we have just passed the 1 million mark, that's
a lot of people.
It is. I mean, it's not spread out like Atlanta.
I live in Atlanta, and I forget that 1 million people's a lot of people. But 1 million. I mean, Winnipeg, Manitoba. That's the home of my beloved Jets.
Yeah,
doesn't have 1 million people in it. So hello.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys have not gotten a new Atlanta has not gotten a new NHL team yet. So
hey, not to shout out my own podcast, but hey, there's a podcast I just put out a little while ago. I hadn't even promoted it yet. I've been so busy, but I tell you what, there might be an NHL team in the future. Maybe, just saying.
That would be exciting. As long as we could get these sports off of Bally Sports, or at least get Bally better spread out among the distributors of television.
Well, so let's get back on the beam here. This is
sure.
Okay. So what I'm saying with all this, Atlanta is a big place. Is Atlanta is not Georgia. Okay, Georgia is like. The numbers would indicate that, so Atlanta is pulling Georgia up.
Yeah.
According to all the measurable numbers. Okay. So if you take Atlanta and vicinity out of the situation, you've got something on par with Mississippi in terms of life expectancy, in terms of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And okay, so that's part of our political moment here, is that a certain cohort of humans are very angry that Atlanta exists and that it is big and whatever else.
Except that they pay all the taxes,
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I get it. I'm with you. I'm with you there, Skipper. I am. It's like okay, but
that's kind of like the argument that people are they think that California and New York and Massachusetts and Florida, that these giant states are such a drain on the federal budget, except that the federal budget is mostly made up of the money that is pooled in from those states. Yeah. Georgia being included in there because of Atlanta.
And I've said on your show before that this is a serious problem in our state. And what I'm hoping is that post-pandemic people can take this high-speed internet and go out into the state and live and exist and whatever else. But I don't know, man. I mean, I read somewhere that Atlanta has more mixed race couples than lots of other places, lots of other places. You can live in Atlanta these days and totally forget that it's not normal because I mean, every time I go to the mall, it's like I notice the white people, I notice the white couples.
Oh yeah.
Because that's that's the rare thing. You see a lot of Koreans and blacks or Hispanics and Koreans or whatever, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And I forget that lots of places are not as multicultural friendly as Atlanta is. So when you're asking a multiracial couple, hey, go move down to wherever or go move out to wherever, that's sort of a concern. I mean,
no, and that's a very valid point. I would agree. Columbia, South Carolina is an extremely diverse population. I think that between mostly Richland County and portions of Lexington County here where I live, I recognize that there is more diversity. You're seeing more minority populations spring up in different areas, and I think that while there is likely a campaign to try and squash that, there is also you can't stop it in some cases because South Carolina is an inexpensive place to live.
Okay, so my question is, and I think I know the answer, but it's just a question to the floor. If they made, I guess somehow you could make multiracial marriages illegal if you wanted to do that.
There are states that are working on it.
I'm sure. Okay. I hate to tell you,
Texas
folks,
is one of them.
Yeah.
Texas is one of the states where they would like to see fewer multiracial partnerships and marriages.
Yeah. That's so insane.
I hate to tell you, folks, but you can't do. I mean, you can do that. You can try to do that, but I invite all of you to go and read the history of Prohibition.
Yeah.
All of you arch conservatives, please stop what you're doing and go read an honest telling of the history of Prohibition. They don't read. Well, some of them do. Some of them do.
Well, you got to put it on 4chan or 8chan for them to.
Well, but I'm just saying, okay, there's a principle that I got an object lesson for very young in my life. And that is when you start making things illegal that people do anyway, people are going to stop following you. They're going to stop paying attention.
Even if it's things that they believe in. Even if it's things that they believe should be illegal, that sort of, I mean, is that the mentality?
No, it's okay. Maybe I didn't say it. If you're making things illegal that people do anyway. So if you say, you can't, you can't marry somebody that's not your same race. Okay. People do that anyway. Eventually you're either going to stop having marriages or you're going to start having, why does the government need to be involved in this at all?
Totally agree.
Which is where I am. That's probably my most right-wing position, is why in the world does the government need to be involved in anybody's love life?
Totally agree. And I don't know that I don't know that that's a conservative viewpoint or a right wing viewpoint. I know plenty of people that would consider themselves to be either left leaning or moderately left leaning that do not agree with the idea that in order to get married to somebody that you have to go and get a license for it. Like, why is the state government involved in something like this?
Why?
Yeah,
and
so dumb.
And okay, when people start, well, it's better for society. All right, it's 2022. When somebody starts saying the word society to me in 2022, I'm looking for somebody to answer a phone.
Yeah.
That's a job.
Yeah.
You're making jobs for people to answer phones. All right? Is that something you want to do? Yes or no?
No, you're right. No, you're right. I just, those are the things that I think that people are not recognizing. And you and I have discussed like some of the potentials of having a majority, because right now the right wing rules by minority. The right wing, the GOP, is not, for the most part. You look at the demographics across the country, in the big cities, you tend to see more blue, but it's relatively purple. You look in the rural areas, especially Georgia, South Carolina, it is more red. But when you combine all of the numbers and you look at it, this country tends to lean more moderately liberal than it does to the right, and or this idea of conservative.
Yeah.
Republicans are not conservative. You just look at how much money was spent over the course of 20 years.
I'm sorry, but you can't be conservative and think that you should legislate who somebody should marry, or that's not.
That by definition is big government. I mean, that by definition is big brother. And this idea that you want to limit what rights women have to their own autonomy, or that you want to limit the ability for people to even vote. I mean, you've got some states that are trying to reinstitutionalize Jim Crow era rules to voting, where, like in Texas, the GOP has already said that they want to institute a reading test at the poll in order for you to be able to vote, that you would have to read an oath out loud. And Texas is an extremely diverse state in respect to white versus Mexican Americans or Latino Americans, that sort of thing, and they want to institutionalize, because they don't. There's this fear that if you allow people to vote based on whether or not they can read, it's not fear, it's what they want, but they want to be able to limit the number of people that are voting. Do they own land?
Well,
can they own property? Does that then disqualify them from being able to vote if they rent a house or a car versus renting, owning their own property?
Well, okay, so sure, and there's also Moore versus Harper, which I've talked about on my show, and
yep.
But this is what I believe, and this is what I actually believe, and this is, maybe I'm just a hopeless liberal or whatever, but here's what I actually believe. So America on a bad day has the third biggest economy on earth.
Right.
And the Constitution as written was written in the Middle Ages. Okay,
right.
The Constitution as written was written in the Middle Ages. Can you put the third biggest economy in the world in the Middle Ages politically? I don't think you can. I don't think that's possible. People say, even on my show, somebody said, well, China is the biggest economy on earth and it's in an authoritarian government. Yes, but the authoritarian government China's in is 21st century. You can't put... You can't. It's just not possible.
And I may be wrong in how I recognize China, but China's financial system is capitalistic when it comes to their market, but they have so many institutionally communistic checks and balances on things, that's why people say, oh, well, China's communism. Yeah, they are in a sense, but it's also very, the Chinese people have the ability to control their own market when it comes to where they spend their money or what they spend it on. The government has the ability to lock them into an IKEA when someone sneezes. So, it's sort of a yin and yang, but it's not really it's not an equal yin and yang. The Chinese people have a lot of power when it comes to where they spend their money. And they can like if Xi Jinping comes out and says, you all are going to spend your money at the Chinese version of McDonald's, the people can decide whether they're going to spend their money there or they're not. But then it's the government who then puts a McDonald's on every single corner that kind of makes it too easy to spend your money there. So it's
right.
It's a difficult, they haven't figured out how to make it really work. They've just kind of figured out how to force it, but then they subsidize Chinese subsidize everything the way the American government subsidizes everything.
But here's something, I mean, there seems to be on the right this obsession with sameness and race and all this, but here's something where I get really, really deeply historically and philosophical here. The idea of whiteness is a politically interpolated thing. Okay, it just is. If you have any Jewish friends, or because I don't know if you're not Jewish, I don't know if Zach is Jewish or not. I'm not Jewish. If you have any Jewish friends and they're smart, and they're historically aware, they'll be able to tell you that there was a time when Jewish people in this country weren't considered white.
Yes.
Right. So here's what I'm saying. We're seeing Hispanics become, I guess, white in real time. That's something happening in real time.
Yeah.
I've got news for people that, honest to God, don't do the anti-multiracial marriage thing, because people will stop listening to you. Like, I know that's true.
Yeah.
From my own life, I know that's true. If you pass laws that people don't want to listen to, they're not going to listen to them, and you're going to have a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I mean, here's the thing. Technically, it's illegal to it's illegal for me to own a DVD and then give it to you.
That's true.
And then you take it out of my house and you watch it. Who's been arrested for that? Who's been arrested for that?
Yeah, who's enforcing that?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Technically, what's another one? What was the one that blew my freaking mind years ago? Technically, for years and years, it was illegal for VCRs to exist while they were being sold on the market. It was literally while you could walk into a Sears, back when Sears was around, and buy a VCR. It was illegal for VCRs to exist. They actually had to have a court case. They had to have a Supreme Court case because everybody was like, "Oh crap! Hang on, back up a minute. This is real. Like, this is a thing that's happening." Wow. 5 of the justices have a VCR in their home.
They're all blinking 12. They're all blinking 12 o'clock. But yeah, the justices have them.
That was actually in the opinion. Like, I have to vote for it because that was in RCA, the opinion. I have to vote for this because I have a VCR in my house.
That's crazy.
It has auto tracking. It's awesome.
Well, so before we wrap this up, the last thing I wanted to bring up was, so we've discussed Warnock and we've discussed Walker, and in my opinion, I think that Warnock is an outstanding candidate and will represent the state of Georgia. Current polling shows.
There's actually a fascinating thing with Walker and Warnock and Kemp.
Yeah,
there's a lot of Kemp Warnock voters.
Yeah,
but by every poll out there, there's a lot of Warnock and Kemp voters. I don't know if Stacey Abrams is going to be my governor. I'm pretty sure Warnock is going to be my senator.
Yeah. Yeah. Based on the polls that were released over the course of the last 4 days, on average, Warnock is trending about 4 points higher than Walker. Now, one of the things, and Kemp is trending about 4 to 5 points above Stacey Abrams.
Well, here's the thing about polls, though, that in 2022, they're conducted over a phone, cell phone.
Correct.
Okay.
Some of them are conducted over text message.
During the week, I get polled about 7 times a day.
Yeah, I believe it.
I have answered to none of these polls. I'm not dumb enough to answer a political poll over a phone. I'm sorry. I'm not that stupid. Number one. Number two, how many, and this is a question because I'm not in this world anymore. I don't know. If I live in Georgia, but I have a Colorado number, are you texting me?
It depends. If you have it just depends. If you have that number as an available, so if you voted in a primary, and you have ever responded to a poll before as you, and you voted in a primary, that's how you get polled. That is, but yeah, no, there are definite issues with polling. Especially in the case that, so most of that was going to be my point, was the fact that most of the polling that's being done right now, the only way you get polled is if you have voted in a primary. That is it, because the polling is conducted by groups that have that information. They know whether you voted in the Democratic primary or you voted in the Republican primary. So in South Carolina right now, all of the polling indicates that Jim Cunningham here running against Foghorn Leghorn Foghorn Leghorn is running at about 10 to 15 points in some cases above Joe Cunningham. Despite the fact that Joe Cunningham is running on a platform that's, in my opinion, fairly moderate. The only things that really stand out, he's not in favor of a $15 state recognized hourly wage. Yeah. He is in favor, however, of legalizing marijuana and legalizing gambling in South Carolina, that would potentially bring millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into the social programs like schools, like roads, those sorts of things.
Casinos in South Carolina?
So South Carolina, I'm not going to say yes.
I think
to
in
that.
North Carolina, I know.
North Carolina, we have Indian tribes.
Casinos is the wrong word. I thought there were.
There was an effort 10 years ago. Yes. So you can take as long as you sail out 6 miles into international waters, you can get on a casino cruise. And they go out for 6 to 10 hours and whatnot. It's drinking and casinos and my thing. But the idea is
Barrett and
that
I just gamble on Grand Theft Auto and that.
But the casino, Georgetown is one of our coastal cities that was for 100 years was a location of industry where there was paper milling and there was we had shipping was out of Georgetown. It is not anymore. Charleston, Savannah, Wilmington, these are the areas along the southeastern coast where you see most of that going on now. But Georgetown would absolutely benefit from having legal gambling, having government controlled or at least regulated gambling available in casinos. And here in South Carolina, just do everybody a favor. Designate that as tribal land and then give it to the Catawbas or give it to the, whichever tribal, and then let them benefit from it, because we certainly owe the Native Americans virtually everything.
Why would, enough. I mean, I get the other side of that's. I get the other side of you don't want to live around a casino and you don't want your, I get that. I really get that. That they're trying to put casinos in Atlanta, and I'm not a fan of that at all.
Sure.
I think Atlanta needs a casino like I need, a bunch of whiskey.
But in Georgia, you could legalize gambling.
Yeah,
you could
but-
legalize gambling in Georgia, and you don't have to put casinos up to legalize gambling. You just
we
you
have the
legalize it.
lottery. I mean, does South Carolina have
Sure.
a lottery?
Yeah, South Carolina's got a lottery that's similar in structure to what Georgia has. It was built about 10 years after. No, sorry, about 25 years after what Georgia got.
Really?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's
and we used to
similar
have
in
these
structure.
commercials with this guy named Bubba who
Yeah.
would tell you that Georgia's got a lottery. Why South Carolina? And I went to a South Carolina Georgia game in '99, and Bubba was sitting directly behind us. I was like, this son of a bitch, I can't get rid of him.
That's
But yeah,
great.
we only more recently got a lottery like 30 years ago.
Yeah,
That's
I was here when South Carolina got a lottery, because I remember getting breakfast downtown and and beginning to see the lottery, advertisements go up. But you can get the Mega Millions here, you can get the Powerball here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Like,
yeah,
we're not in Georgia. Fine.
I remember when the lottery. I mean, I was a child, but I remember when the lottery happened.
yeah,
And then, of course, I studied about the politics of the lottery and why that. I mean, what the deal was supposed to be, and all this. And the other side of it is, I lived right next to a deli that sold every day. They would, one lottery ticket, all right, but if you're buying like 6 feet, not an exaggeration. There was a chap that was the same one chap buying 6 feet of lottery tickets a day. 6 feet.
yeah, yeah. I won't deny that there is excess, but it's the same as alcohol.
You're right.
People have to be held. People have to hold themselves responsible, which ultimately you would think would be a conservative Republican thing, but it almost always comes from the left when it says, "Well, how do you make sure this doesn't get out of hand?" Well, people hold themselves responsible. That's not a Republican ideal.
It's responsibility for thee and not me is the Republican ideal. I mean, that's really it.
Do as I say, not as I do.
It
doesn't apply to me.
I actually, this is not an exaggeration. I actually I was on Twitter, and there was somebody processing. There was a lady, presumably a woman, because it's Twitter, so you don't know, but presumably a woman. And
I've been duped before.
She was basically processing the fact on Twitter that she was pro-life, but that meant that she couldn't have an abortion because it's like America. There's this lesson that America has to go through all the time of there's loads of people that don't want to be in a society. They literally just don't want to live in a society.
I go through that at least twice a week.
I was going to say, that's Barrett's retirement goal, to not be part of society.
But do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah.
But they want to pass laws that don't affect them, but affect other.
Right.
But you can't do that. I mean, you cannot do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I that's it, the idea. Yeah, it's the do as I say, not as I do mentality. It's like,
and I guarantee you, if these people, if they outlaw interracial marriage, well, what do you mean? I'm married to somebody from Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I'll just say this, that I am constantly dumbfounded by the mentality of what people consider to be conservative viewpoints, but do not align with the lifestyles that those individuals live.
Right.
I have friends that that order their marijuana from Colorado, but will vote Republican because that's what they've always done. That they still have this idea that the Republican Party represents some sort of fiscal responsibility or represents some sort of conservative moral responsibility.
Well, fun fact: the housing crash was caused by policies from George W. Bush.
Right. Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
caused by policies from George W. Bush. The recession of 1991 was caused by policies from Reagan.
Right.
I mean,
correct. And just to point out, I realize they just released these deficit numbers while the deficit in the United States is not as high as it was under Trump. But of course, you have to recognize that Trump had to deal with one. We still had an ongoing war in Afghanistan. We also had the pandemic. So I won't say that it was completely his responsibility, but I also recognize that there were tax breaks given to corporations that basically took them from 2.5 or 1.5% down to 0. So corporations were now off the hook for paying taxes. And it also took the percentage that people in the upper echelon of money also were taken off the hook. And then you see, like, my taxes went up last year. My taxes will go up again this year. And people are blaming Joe Biden for that. But it's not because of Joe Biden. It's because specifically the law that the Republicans voted into place while Trump was president, those tax breaks are expiring. And people don't, and somebody said, well, why doesn't Biden just go ahead and do that again? Because that requires both sides of the aisle to come together to make those laws to reduce the taxes.
And I yell about this on Twitter all the time, and I'm going to yell about it on your show. We've figured out a way in our society to become a functioning adult and to sleep through civics class.
Sure.
And that's not a good idea. That's not a recipe for success. And the other problem I think that we have that maybe our parents didn't have, because immigration was at an all-time low during the baby boomer situation because of some laws. Not to be xenophobic here, but you have a lot of immigrants in this country who don't understand what our system of government actually is. So they're surprised to find out every election cycle that we don't live in a parliamentary system. Right? Mm-hmm. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's almost like, and there's a lot of adults now, there's a whole lot of adults that didn't go to college or didn't go to high school in America even. So there's almost like we need to have this adult education system that doesn't happen on a college campus where you explain to grown-ups, like, this is what the American system of government is.
Yeah.
And
like a Sesame Street once a week sort of program that everyone
but not for Sesame Street, but not for 4-year-olds, right?
Formatted appropriately. Yeah. I agree.
Honestly, or
put it on during the halftime of football.
There you go. Yeah. Have somebody walk out onto a football field during the halftime show with a lectern and a microphone and just say, listen, this is we're going to get back to the football. We got 17 minutes, 32 seconds, and we're going to get back to it. The teams are resting right now. So what we're going to talk about is, this is how a bill becomes law. I would, and you know what?
Mr. Schoolhouse Rock, you choose.
Yeah. I think fundamentally that this would be a terrific idea for. Yeah, no, I agree, Ben. I think adult education would be a good idea, and I think that
how do you do that? Right.
NPR is a great source of information, whether it's, but the problem is everyone, so many on the right consider NPR to be one of those, it's a left-wing media source, which, it's not. It's publicly funded. The NPR as a whole has the ability to be representative of both sides equally, if both sides are willing to participate. But you have the right wing that thinks NPR is nothing but a liberal outsource and won't participate.
The problem, and this is a structural problem in this country, a lot of in order to prosper from liberalism, you have to live in a place where that can happen. And there's a lot of places in this country that don't do that. They don't
work for the Romans.
I mean, like
for hundreds of years.
When I was up in Cartersville looking at some of these people in the face, some of the old timers in the face, they were terrified of all the growth. They were literally scared. I mean, it was literally scared. I mean, scared, and in a visceral, not in an intellectual way. They were scared of something that they thought that these people were going to take away from them.
Sure. And I can see, I can certainly recognize that in certain aspects of the poor white community, in that
they weren't poor. They also weren't poor.
Well, but as individuals that live unto themselves, that primarily would keep to themselves, I can recognize that there is a fear of there being some sort of interaction with people that you don't know their culture. And it's not because you're against it, but you just don't understand it, or that you don't know enough about it. And I'll give it to some individuals that might create a prejudice, and which, while I would prefer that everyone be open-minded, I certainly recognize that prejudices do limit people's ability to interact or to even engage or diversify themselves, to try something new. But we are, as much as some people don't want to recognize it, we are part of a global society. This planet is so much smaller than it was 100 years ago.
It's smaller. Well, I can talk on this. I talk to folks all over the world.
Yeah.
It's smaller than it was 10 years ago. It's smaller than it was. Hell, I'll go even further than that. It's smaller than it was in 2018. And I can give you example after. I can talk to you. We talk for an hour and a half. I can give you examples for hours of people that I've talked to. This is one of my favorite stories. I had a guest who needed his Skype password for work. So he lived in some other country when he was a child. So he had to write home to his mother, "Can you please mail me my Skype password?"
That's crazy.
Because he had Skype when he was a child, and now he needed it for work.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to people every single day. Every single day that I sit in front of this microphone and talk to anybody. I talk to people every single day that say to me, "I used this as a kid. I didn't know I was going to be using this as an adult.
Sure.
And here I am." I mean, and this is what I tell people. One of the things that I've just thought a lot for 2 years is right now we're using stuff that was pre-plague. What happens when we start using stuff that's post-plague?
Well, what would be an example of something that would be post-plague?
Yeah, post-plague.
Have either one of you been in a controlled environment with virtual reality?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like a controlled environment, not your friend's house with their screaming child and the cat, but like it's crazy what they can do on the stupid Oculus, on the cheapo Oculus. It's crazy what they can do today.
I used to have PSVR. Played that a lot.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It's
like metaverse wise would be like post, like instead of going to the office ever again, you literally just go into the metaverse and you're in a virtual office kind of deal.
Well, I don't think it's gonna be the metaverse, but it's gonna be something.
Yeah.
Very much like that.
You have doctors working remotely on surgeries now.
Shit, that's what the I saw the the Oculus, whatever they call it now, the Meta 2
presentation.
They don't call it Oculus.
Yeah.
Well, they were like, and doctors can train in the metaverse, and I'm like, fuck no. If someone goes like, all right, going to give you heart surgery, but I've been training. I've put at least thousands of hours
70,
into the metaverse.
Yeah.
I'll be like, no.
Yeah,
I
mean, it's a giant. It's a metaverse version of what was the board game where you had to reach in with
Operation.
tweezers? Yeah, Operation the metaverse version of the Operation they call training.
Yeah, this would be great. The robot's going to do exactly what my hand should do. I'm like, yeah, you lost me there. I don't know anymore.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's something to be said for robots and the precise degree.
I mean,
don't get me wrong about that, but like
especially when it comes to artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
I mean, we're gonna have to think of other things for humans to do, but I swear to God,
Star Trek.
I sit here like every day, and I talk to these people, and I can, maybe it's because I talk to a broad cross section, but I can see it. Like I can actually see this future happen.
Yeah,
I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but I can. You talk to
coming.
you talk to this physicist and this guy and this person and that guy and blah blah, and you're like, oh God, like it's coming down the road soon, people. And the thing that I'm concerned about is if you get angry at soccer existing in America, if that's what gets you, if that gets you riled up, how are you going to be able to handle, like you were saying, Barrett, the doctor, like doing heart surgery and you're in somewhere and he's somewhere else? Or how are you going to handle, I have a job and the job is in my bedroom, but I'm talking to people in India, and that's the normal situation. This is coming.
Yeah, you're right.
It's coming very, very soon.
It's that reach out and touch somebody, and technology is just really putting the world together into one.
And here's and this thing about I want to make multiracial marriages illegal. What's going to happen when people can pick where they live?
Right.
If you could just, without quitting your job, if you could, okay, I'm taking this Oculus and this laptop and all right, where are we going? Okay, awesome. Bad. Let's
Alaska.
Let's go. All right. Let's go to Michigan. Let's go to, sure, whatever.
Edge of a fjord in Norway.
I mean, and
quit bringing up the fjords.
And I'm gonna drop something on you guys. And I talked to a owner of a Tesla car for my show, a Tesla, car, and that's a lot closer than people think. For battery operated cars, that's a lot closer.
Yeah,
and
Ford actually has that feasible F-150 that's only like $33,000 to get it, which is awesome.
Yeah.
What are our politics going to look like? What are our politics going to look like when there's a percentage of the population who doesn't care about gas?
Mm-hmm.
Who literally doesn't care?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they'll just tax you for not using it until more people don't use it and you get pissed off about it.
Well, see, and here's my thing. If you have a battery operated car and you have a remote job, you could take your battery operated car and move your remote job to where they don't tax you.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is very true. That is very true.
See?
Well, Ben, we're gonna wrap. Right. Yeah, no, I agree. We're gonna wrap it up because we've pushed that hour and a half mark. But
we've been on for a long time.
I know.
Yeah.
This is from the perspective of a Georgia voter who has already voted. That's which I'm astounded because Georgia had the highest turnout for early voting participation on the first day last Monday, which is excellent.
I just wanted to throw some numbers out before we get off.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Every day, the African American turnout has increased, and it's held steady at 30% over what it was in 2018. I think even 2020.
That's awesome.
personally, and I'm saying this as a white person, I don't know if you can hear the Caucasianness in my voice, but I'm a Caucasian human.
You're losing melanoma. Melanoma? That's not the right word.
Melanin.
You're losing melanin every second. Every second we sit inside of a house in the shade.
All right. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if I were African American, if I would vote for Herschel Walker. I could see where somebody who is black would be offended by Herschel Walker's story.
Yeah.
I could see that. So
I see Herschel Walker's story as being the stereotype of what several in the black population would consider to be way too in line of what people think of blacks in this country.
A certain type of people, but yeah.
So
right.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Well,
no,
Ben, I will say this: we're gonna have to do another episode with you, because there's especially when we get after the election, because I definitely want to get your perspective on what happened.
I want to get my perspective on. I'm fascinated. I'm bizarrely fascinated to see what this is going to look like.
It's going to be interesting. That's for sure.
Cool.
All right. Well, Ben, hard sell your podcast, where they can listen, where they can find information.
My podcast is called the History Voyager Podcast. If you take that thumb and go far enough down, you'll hear a podcast about the Spanish flu, a deep dive in Spanish flu and COVID. It's called the History Voyager Podcast. It's a green background with a skull. I'm told my logo is not a good logo. It doesn't look good. I do want to spend some money on that one day. My biggest regret is I didn't spend any money on a logo.
We know a guy.
Yeah,
we do know a guy.
Well, I that's my biggest regret with this show. But I love my show. I talk to people about this wacky world that we live in these days, and if these people stop being interesting, I'm going to get into a deep dive on the tulip bubble or something.
Sure. Yeah. Find subject where subject matter exists.
But I'm going to possibly release a show today about something. I've got stuff in the can.
Well, that's awesome.
Thank you, Nick the Geek, engineer and producer, owner and operator of GOT Sound Studio. Check out details on how you can utilize his talent and production expertise at gotsoundstudio.com. Thanks to Muff the Producer. Follow him on Instagram at Muff the Producer. Thanks to Shiana Rivers for the intro and outro. Follow her podcast, Who You Callin' Holistic, available on most of your podcast listening platforms. Thanks to Trent Clark, aka DJ Lonzo, currently serving as the house DJ at the Main Course in Columbia, South Carolina. Make sure to go by and have a good time. You can contact Trent for all your entertainment needs. Trent at theallaboutnothing.com, and on Instagram at TheRealDJLonzo. On Twitter at DJ Lonzo Top 5. You can also phone him 803-262-7982. If you enjoy the show, consider becoming a patron by visiting our website and clicking at the link at the top of the browser that will take you to our Patreon page. You can find details on how you become a supporter, or you can check out benefits there and just consider a donation so that we can continue to bring you this nonsense. We enjoy doing it. We enjoy you enjoying it. As always, you can follow us on Facebook. Just search for All About Nothing US. On Twitter and Instagram at AAN_pod, or you can find links to all of our social media and available podcast platforms by visiting theallaboutnothing.com. If you'd like to be heard on the show, you may call and leave us a message, 803-672-0533. If the time between these episodes is too far apart, you can fill that time by checking out some of our partner podcasts. Zach and I host What the Pod Was That with Carrie Simmons. Visit whatthepodwasthat.com for links and details. Carrie and Chrissy host Status Macabre. You can find details at statusmacabre.com. Ami Bland takes a deep dive down the rabbit hole in episodes of Welcome to Wonderland, available on all of your podcast listening platforms. As well, you should check out our own DJ Lonzo's Top 5, hosted by Trent Clark, available on most of your podcast listening platforms.
All right.
Cool. Well, Ben, thank you very much. History Voyager Podcast is available where you can listen to all your podcasts. It's History Voyager.
And I have a website.
Yeah, please give the website.
Thehistoryvoyager.com. It's called thehistoryvoyager.com.
Links, information, all available there.
Yeah. All right, folks.
Well, make sure to check our show notes as well. You'll have we'll add the links to the show notes so you can find the History Voyager podcast. Ben Kitchings, thank you very much again for being on the program with us. Zach, thanks for joining us. I know Sunday mornings are tough for you because bed.
Yeah, and I do have to watch the little one. I forgot Gabriella's going somewhere. She just reminded me, when are you coming down? I have to leave.
That's great. All right. We'll wrap it up. Make sure tomorrow, South Carolina, October 24th, we have a big debate, Judd Larkins and Joe Wilson. I'm going to be there. I'm going to try and drag Zach to it so that we can cheer when, good things are said. But most importantly... Yeah, exactly. Joe Wilson, you're going to get yelled at, or you're going to be a liar. Also, early voting in South Carolina starts today, the day of this podcast released, 24th October. Early voting, South Carolina, so make sure to get out there. If you're in Georgia, early voting's already started. Go vote. All right, it's very important. Go ahead, Ben.
Vote.
Yeah, just vote. Just vote. So that is going to do it. Thank you very much, everybody, for being on the program. Zach King, thank you much, Ben Kitchings. Everybody stay safe and
have a week.
This The All About Nothing podcast is recorded live from the Maddie Johnson Podcast Studio at GOT Sound Studio in Columbia, South Carolina. The All About Nothing podcast is produced and engineered by Neek the Geek, owner and operator of GOT Sound Studio. To support the show, please visit theallaboutnothing.com for links to social media, merchandise, and more. Become a patron of the show by following the Patreon link at the top of our page. The All About Nothing podcast is an entertainment product of Barrett Gruber. Special thanks to Zach King, Trent Clark, Muff the producer, Neek the Geek, and you, our listeners. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share. If you're on YouTube, please hit the like button and the notification bell. Thank you for listening.
The All About Nothing podcast is a part of the GOT Podcast Network and a product of Barrett Gruber